All right. Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty Live, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. Today we are debating some interesting topics. Spence versus Clark, VA versus iFollow. To PLD or not to PLD? That is the question. So get in the chat, like and subscribe, and let's go. All right, boys, we are back. We're going to have an interesting episode today. Like I said before, we're going to be doing a little debate style. So a little to and fro, little frip and frap here with our two main hosts here, Joe and Russell, taking sides on these topics here, giving all you Kings fans what you need to know about the Kings. But before we get in there, how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good. Feels a little weird not to have any more hockey on. I mean, I'm sure Kings fans may be a little disappointed in the outcome of the Stanley Cup final, but feel pretty good about some of our well-known ex-Kings there. Seeing some of the footage, especially was it Marty handing the cup off to Quick there? That was pretty cool. So a little disappointing with the division rival winning, and I'm sure maybe it's a little bit more disappointing for some other teams that have had to wait a little bit longer. But yeah, like I mentioned, it's pretty cool to see Quick and Marty and all them get the cup again.
Could be disappointing for Buffalo. I know I always reference them here in Western New York, but I got to be honest, I just love seeing Eichel dominate the way he dominated. He would have been my pick for Conn Smythe, but obviously Marchessault's a good choice. But I'm doing pretty well, Randon. IKF just still home, so the Yankees have a lead on the Mets. I know baseball isn't really something you want to talk about right now, but yeah, things are going okay.
Nav says hello all except for Joe, who's crushing my dreams today. So there you go. Yeah, I didn't watch any of the Stanley Cup. I was dead inside. So Marty passing the cup to Quick, could care less.
It was awesome.
Really did not care about the Stanley Cup. For all you don't know, obviously my ace fandom here. My team or my name, if you're watching the YouTube live, Oak Together and Fisher Out. Last night was the reverse boycott for A's fans, trying to keep the team, trying to force the ownership to sell, really putting the pressure on there and keep baseball in Oakland for over 55 years. And it's a travesty what's going on. And it just seems like the team is slipping further and further away out of the grasp. And it's like, this is my longest team I've watched. I've watched them since I've been 5, and first baseball game I ever went to. So before I get crying on this podcast, it's a shame. So for all you guys out there listening, I know if you're baseball fans or not baseball fans, look up reverse boycott, look up what happened last night. I think it was the single greatest thing I've ever seen in sports brought on by fans. Fans raised $50,000 to get shirts made that say sell. They gave them out for free at the event. They had DJs, they had food trucks, all this kind of stuff paid for by the fans to tailgate in the parking lot, 27,000 people. And people are like, oh, that's not a lot of people. Well, the max for Oakland right now, because the organization closed out the upper deck, is 30,000. So it was almost a sellout for the team. I remember days back when they faced the Tigers in the wild card, and there were 48,000 people in there, packed strong, decibel levels up the wazoo. You couldn't even hear yourself think. And in last night's game, the noise got so loud, the pitch thing for the pitcher, our own pitcher couldn't hear the call that the catcher was making in those electronic things. They had to call timeout and wait for the noise to die down in order to continue the game. So tell me that there's no fandom in Oakland. Fisher, you can go F yourself. And that's what I got to say on that.
Yeah, I know. I feel you, man. I mean, I can't imagine that disappointment. I mean, I saw all the footage from last night and that 5th inning where they just had that moment of silence almost, and then all of a sudden come back out with that loud sell the team chant. I mean, man, that's like a ESPN 60 documentary kind of stuff right there. I mean, it's just disappointing. I feel for those fans. I can only imagine. And you too, man. I feel for you too.
I mean, I just look at not only me, but my brother. My brother is an A's and Raiders fan. Both his teams lost. My brother, when Raiders left, he stopped watching football. My brother no longer watches the sport. I play this game since I was like in diapers, and like this has been my team. And to think about not watching a sport after you've loved it your whole life is just like I don't know. I'm not going to be an A's fan. Like you sell our team and take it to Vegas. Like the only hope that I think that maybe teams would have, one, if people don't know, there's an antitrust thing. MLB's antitrust for like over a century. You know, and there's a lot of lawmakers threatening to revoke that from the MLB if they allow this move to happen. But my thing would be like, you look at the Browns, they moved the team and changed the team name, changed the team identity to the Ravens, and allowed somebody to put another team back there, which would be the A's. I think that's the only hope A's fans have right now. If Fisher decides to rebrand the whole team, which why wouldn't you? If you're going to go to Vegas, why wouldn't you rebrand it, start fresh, do all that? If that happens, then another billionaire could come in and reinvigorate the A's back in Oakland. But if they keep the team name, I mean, I think baseball in Oakland is dead forever. Which is
sad. Sucks to see.
So yeah, don't want to get in too much into that crying. Let's get into the fan base here for us LA Kings. Robert coming in here. What up, guys? Holden with a how's it going, guys? Yo, yo, yo. Nav coming in here. Hey, I still like you, Joe.
Love you, Nav.
Anthony Carrizzo. Hey, guys. Let's get into this debate here. All right. So we got a little 2 and 4, little tat here. But before we get into that, Stanley Cup, anything else that anybody wants to talk about before we get in there?
I thought Vegas was awesome. You know, we talked about how, this is such a really, really good team if they can stay healthy, and they stayed healthy for the most part this season, and they were deep and they were really, really freaking good. It didn't matter what goalie they had in net. I know everybody talks that they have defensemen that are big, but they have defensemen that can play. They can skate. They can move pucks. I mean, it was a really, really, it was a dominant series by Vegas. All things. I mean, they dominated a severely injured Florida Panthers team, but regardless, I mean, Vegas was the significantly better team. Did
you hear about some of those injuries?
Oh my God, ridiculous!
Like a fully broken sternum. Like Tkachuk had to have a teammate dress him in the locker room in order for him to play in Game 4. And
believe that.
And then another guy had He had 2 dislocated shoulders. He had broken ribs.
Montour had a separated shoulder.
It just absolutely Florida's playing just completely in a stretcher, in a body bag. You know what? It's so funny because I got in a little bit of a tiff with a Montreal fan about Caulfield being injury prone. He's like, well, he would have played the rest of the season if they weren't in the dumpster. And I kind of was like, no, the doctors made that choice. But when you hear about these players that, hey, if they were in the playoffs, Caulfield would have played. He said, there's no doubt in my mind I would have gutted it out. These kinds of stories kind of reiterate that the hockey players, are able to do those types of things.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's why it's like, I see people talk about like, well, we shouldn't gaslight players playing through injury, but this is something these guys have envisioned accomplishing their whole life. This is their life. I mean, I can't imagine getting your name etched on the Stanley Cup is like a lifetime achievement that, of course, you're going to do everything in your willpower. When you like their blood, sweat, tears, like everything that you've gone through your entire life to get to this one moment, to have your name on the Stanley Cup, the greatest trophy in sports. Dude, I'll play through broken sternum. Like I don't blame the players for going through and playing through all those injuries that they've gone through. I mean, I commend them, really.
They've prepared their whole lives for this, and it's like you would have to tell them no. You can't get mad at the player for wanting to play through this. And I watched Paul Maurice after. It's like Tkachuk, you knew it had to be horrible for Tkachuk to not play. And it was bad. He could have done some serious damage if he played that Game 5. It's like, I don't ever knock these guys. I mean, it's not up to if the team thinks that it's going to make the team worse, if the coach thinks it's going to not help the team, it's up to the coach and the staff to say you're not playing, but I'm never going to get on a player for saying that they want to play, because this is what they do. This is their livelihood. This is what they've trained their entire lives for. And I think it's insane to think that they wouldn't want to play regardless. So, yeah, I think people that say that, they don't get it. I mean, like I never played anywhere near this level, but I played in college, and I had before a championship game, had my foot in a bucket of ice for the entire night, 20 on, 20 off, because I couldn't walk. I had an ankle sprain that was brutal. I was playing the next day though, and there was no way I wasn't. And they would have had to peel me off. It's just the way it goes. I mean, it's how you're wired. So I'll never ever get on players for wanting to play. It's if the coaches and staff want to, and the training staff say it's got to stop, you can't go. But the player's going to want to play.
Yeah. I want to get the guys' thoughts too, real quick, on the whole Vegas. Like, I know they're the Pacific Division and whatnot, but do you guys think that Vegas is like a big rival of the Kings? Because me personally, I don't. I mean, I guess you can go back to that playoff matchup that they had, but even then, I mean, it wasn't really. It doesn't really feel like it was so. It was kind of a lopsided matchup because of the whole, like, the Kings were kind of on the sunset of their championship years. I mean, Vegas kind of had a really good team just from the start, so it never really felt like a whole rivalry was being born there. But what do you guys think, Brandon? I'll just start with you.
I think it's one-sided.
You think it's one-sided? But do you think it's an actual rivalry between both teams? Like,
I think between the teams, I don't know, right? Because you've heard like there's lots of Kings fans that don't like the Ducks, but Doughty was like, yeah, like us Ducks players hang out, but I can't stand playing San Jose, right? So it's like, do the players feel that? I don't know, but like I know plenty of Vegas fans, and they could care less about the Kings. Right. Like, I think that rivalry is one-sided. I think it's like, hey, they came into the league. They were good right away. People thought, hey, they would suffer, right? William Carson's your number one seed. They're going to suffer in this year. And then they ended up, making the playoffs and blowing the door out thing. Kings fans were like, man, we had a long time to be good, let alone win a cup. And there's still some teams that have never won a cup. And you're like, you're making waves right away. So I think it's almost like, a jealousy rivalry from the Kings standpoint, where Vegas could care less about the Kings. I don't even know if the Vegas really has a rivalry at this point, because there hasn't been like the knockout dragout playoff series in like back-to-back years or geographically. Like, maybe we'll see that when the Kings get or stay good for the next couple of years, and then they're up on the totem pole, and then that geographical location might play a factor into it. But I also think the scheduling has eliminated a lot of the new rivalry making, because now you're playing every team in the Eastern Conference. There's not as many games against your own division. To be honest with you, I think that's solely for money. It has nothing to do with growing the game or rivalries, because now you have one game there, one game here against Eastern Conference. What they should do is it should be every other year. You play that team one time, it should be every other year, whether it's home or away, get another division game in there. And usually those games come down to the wire, where a lot more to do with the standings, a lot more to play. But it's like, I could care less about a game against Ottawa or the Maple Leafs or whatever in LA. Like, I know fans want it, and I know ticket sales demand it, but it really doesn't mean anything to me. Like, I would rather see, if I was a season ticket holder, the matchups day to day. I'd rather see the Edmonton Oilers. I'd rather see the Sharks come in and play, rather than these random teams from the Eastern Conference that there's really no emotional investment in. Like, you look at all the matchups throughout history, Yankees, Red Sox, Giants, Dodgers, it's all those things have been brewed over time, and the schedule is not helping that. Like, I think they need to really reconsider how they're doing the schedule going forward.
I'm curious the answer, but both of your thoughts on this, because it's a little different for me. I don't live there, so I don't always have like that hatred, quote unquote, like with the fans or whatever, because I'm on the other side of the country. Like, for me, I don't know. I can't tell you that there's a hockey team that I hate. Like, I hate the Red Sox. Okay, I cannot stand them. I hate the Dallas Cowboys. I hate the Philadelphia Eagles. I'm a Giants fan. So but I don't hate any hockey team. I'm a hockey. I've been around it my entire life, so I just love the game. like there are times when, yeah, like I hated the Ducks for a little bit, like for brief times, but I couldn't care less about the Ducks now. I hate their horn and their stupid goal song, but other than that, I can get over that. The Sharks, again, I hated Joe Thornton sliding across the ice when they beat the Kings. And the Kings were just starting to turn that playoff corner. But like now, like to me, a hatred is like it stays forever. Like that's what, and I couldn't care less about the Sharks or the Ducks right now. But it's like, and same thing with Vegas. I love Vegas. Like I hated them when they beat the crap out of the Kings in that playoff series. But like again, it was short lived. Like I love watching this team. I've loved them since day one, and I love watching Edmonton. So it's hard for me. Like maybe I just feel like maybe I've always had a little disconnect because I've never lived in the area. It's either that or I just like hockey so much to where maybe I'll have little brief moments of hating certain teams or not liking certain teams or whatever because of a playoff matchup. And in general, I've never felt that strong. Like I can't stand them.
So here you go, from Anthony. You don't hate the Oilers, Joe?
No, I love the Oilers. Like,
Blasphemy.
I love watching.
Well, this will be Joe's last podcast, a part of Hockey Royalty. We will find a new host.
Like,
It'll be Russell.
I love watching the Oilers. Like I love great teams, great players. McDavid, Draisaitl.
I think love is a strong word. Do you?
Okay,
is it love or is it appreciate?
Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, I love hockey.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you don't have an emotional response to the Oilers. That would be love.
Okay,
right? Like
fair enough. But like, I just love hockey. I love the sport. So when it's
would
done well,
would you consider the Oilers a bigger rival now for the Kings than even the Sharks?
Right now, because that's the thing. Yeah, like right now, they've met in back-to-back years in playoffs, and the games in the regular season have had a pretty high temperature to them at times. So yeah, like I can definitely sense that if I had to pick a team that would be the biggest Kings rival right now, it would probably be Edmonton. But if you were to ask a Kings fan like maybe Russ, who remembers when he was younger and like Anaheim was a big rival, he lives right there, right? So maybe to Russ it's different. I remember hating Dallas back in the day because they were really good for a while. But like, again, it's so small because I'd maybe hate them when I watch them, but then I wouldn't mind them watching another team. Like if Dallas was playing Chicago, I couldn't care who wins the game. I just love watching the game, So that's where it's like right now, if I were to watch a baseball game, I hope Boston loses every game against every opponent ever. But I don't have that with any NHL team. I can just root for a good game unless I'm betting against them. Like I hate the Islanders because they always beat when I bet against them.
So your loyalty is based on money for Joe. All right.
In that sense. Don't get me wrong. It is Kings. Like I love the Kings. I get an emotional reaction to the Kings. So like I really pull for them. But I don't have the same. Like somebody's mentioned in the Blackhawks. I never once hated the Blackhawks. Never once. And they played in knockout, drag out playoff series, right? That never resonated because it was such good series. They were such good hockey games. Like I didn't dislike the team at all.
Yeah, those Blackhawks Kings series, I never felt like a rivalry. It was almost like a respected, like competitive matchup that the Kings were always up against. It's like you knew the Blackhawks were the best opponent. You would have to get through them at some point.
It was like a good duel.
Exactly. Yeah. Like you never hated them. I mean, it's because like the Blackhawks never really had anybody, a player really that you could just hate either. I mean, Jonathan Taves and Patrick Kane were just like really good hockey players. And I guess like for right now, I mean, I understand like I don't like the Oilers. I mean, I could say, you could say I kind of hate the Oilers. And a lot of it, I guess, goes to some of the antics with some of their players. I mean, Evander Kane hasn't been too nice to some of the Kings players. You could say the same thing with Darnell Nurse and Draisaitl and McDavid even with what he did with Anderson. So I get that sense. That's kind of where I come from there. I mean, but for me, I mean, the number one rival for the Kings has always been the Ducks, and that's just because, like you said, Joe, they're right outside in my backyard. Yeah. And like I grew up in Orange County. One of my best friends growing up was a Ducks fan. So 2007 was like hell to me. I mean, I was just like getting it from all ends. But it was good that we got 2, and you still have that 2-1 kind of argument there. But so, yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of always been the Ducks. But I mean, I guess it kind of fluctuates because yeah, we haven't had that. Besides the Oilers, we haven't really had that rival. I mean, even going back to the Sharks, it seems like you were facing the Sharks almost every other year when the Kings were kind of getting going. But because of the schedule, like Randon mentioned, I agree. I think the schedule right now is just not good. It's not maintaining those rivalries that you're seeing based off the playoff structure that's implemented right now. Like the Kings could end up facing the Oilers the next 5 years in the playoffs just because of the way the playoffs are structured. But you only play them 3 times in the regular season. Like, how does that make any sense? It makes no sense. You're not going to keep that rivalry going. Like, I want to see them play the Oilers like 5 times in the regular season. I'm with you, Ray. I don't need to see them play the Ottawa Senators or the Florida Panthers or any, like, who cares? Who cares about that besides the whole Brendan Lemieux, Brady Tkachuk thing? I mean, I would like to see them go to like maybe like more of a play them one time, like a home one time and then away the next year and then go back and forth. Like that seems to make more sense. And then maybe you'd have like you'd restrict a little bit of travel too for some of these teams. So maybe the players would go for it, but I don't know. I think rivalries could be a little bit better in terms of the NHL, kind of generate a little bit more fanship that way.
Not only that, it would reduce travel for players. So that means more time for resting, more health, less broken sternums. So Gary Bettman, obviously he's watching this pod. So, put that in your notebook, big guy.
Obviously. Yeah.
No Border Sports coming here. Friend of mine. Smash that like button. Appreciate it, No Border. If you like football, he does a lot of stuff with football on his YouTube channel. So go check him out if you like the NFL. So let's get into our topics here. Like I said, it's going to be a debate style. So Joe's going to take a stance. Russell's going to take a stance. And then we're going to kind of talk around it. First one here. If one of these guys is to make the Kings roster and be on the right side of the D. Obviously, we both said we want both these guys on the roster. But if only one can make it, is it going to be Jordan Spence or Brandt Clarke? So, Joe, I'll let you start on this one. You can have opening remarks. Which side are you taking here today?
I'm going to take Jordan Spence. He is just a little further along. I don't know what else he has left to prove. He's played in 87 AHL games. He's got over 100 AHL games. He's got 87 points, 79 of which are assists. He was first team All-Star in 22, all rookie team in 22, had another big year this year. He's played in 30 NHL games. He's played in a few playoff games, including, well, obviously because they didn't get out of the first round, against those hated Edmonton Oilers. He's been in that environment. I think he's ready. I mean, I don't know what else he's got to do at the professional level. Like, again, he's doing this. He's doing all this. I don't know. What's the math on that, Randon? 87 points in 102 games as a defenseman. It's pretty impressive what he's been able to do. I will say I know a lot of it's been on the power play, but that's okay. I mean, the Kings are going to need you're probably looking at these two, Spence and Clarke, as potentially, PP 1 and 2 in the not so distant future, depending on, how long Doughty's able to stick around and be an impactful player. So I just think Spence has done so much at the pro level that I think his time is now.
Well, Joe, I'm going to quote.
Good opening remarks. Good opening remarks. Would you like a rebuttal there, Mr.
Yeah, I'm going to quote one of my favorite movies, Billy Madison, and say, "Everyone in this room is now dumber for what you have just said. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul." I think the real answer should be Brandt Clarke, but I mean, I understand the Spence argument, but I mean, for me, it's just more or less the upside that you're getting from Clarke, and I think getting him in the AHL or starting him off in the AHL, sure, it could do good for his game. Maybe give that bridge and give Spence the turn, because it seems like he's next in line, like Joe just mentioned. But I don't know. I just think Clarke has that upside to be a better player than Spence. What Spence is, especially even now, I think what could be, and that's kind of like the type of player that the Kings need. If we're all thinking that Clarke is going to be this unicorn type defenseman that we all anticipate, then he should be in the lineup day one after opening night. And that's why, I mean, training camp will be fun to watch in terms of some of these matchups and some of these position battles that we'll see. I mean, on the bottom six of the defense, and then also in the bottom, not the bottom six, but the bottom pairings, and then the bottom six of the forward lineup too. that'll be fun to watch. But in terms for me, I think it's Brandt Clark. It's just I like everything we saw in terms of what he did in the OHL. I think Kings fans were just gripping with anticipation, hoping that he would get a look, and maybe even in the playoffs. Of course, that didn't really line up with their season ending, but I think after all the highlights that we've seen, the lacrosse goals he's pulling off, 6 points in a playoff game, I think Kings fans are just waiting and they're just ready to see the type of play that Brandt Clark can bring to the NHL.
Richie Rich coming in here saying, I was really hoping Russ would say if peeing your pants is cool, considering Miles Davis. Well, as
I
the
could
judge,
I can sit here and quote Billy Madison and Happy Gilmore all day.
Love
if you
it.
wanted me to.
I
so
know.
considering I'm the judge, Russell,
I wonder which way Brandon's
going
to go, by the way.
Literally, you just had to say
Yeah,
Brandt
exactly.
Clark's name for me to decide that. But no, my thing is this: is Clark draft capital's there. He has the best, or top 2 or 3 best season by defenseman in the OHL. Was a optimal player on Canada's lineup where Jordan Spence was not. You look at the amount of impact that he's had on his team, pretty much carried his team through the playoffs as a defenseman with multiple goals per night. We got to stop protecting all these guys. And I think that's going to be a discussion for another time about how the Kings handle their prospects. But I think they should just let him fly. I do like what you said, Joe, is the fact that he's proven at a higher level as Spence, right? Like if Clark last year through the 9 games had 5 points and they just decided to keep him down, then you'd be really like, okay, he's already proven at the level of the National Hockey League, but they just didn't have the room, right? So I like Jordan Spence. I do think that the positive maybe for Jordan Spence, I think he's probably more defensively responsible as far as to where he might be able to earn Todd McClellan's trust, has played up in the lineup more minutes at the NHL level. Not saying that Clark is a bad defenseman, because that's already been debunked by multiple scouts that he's not a bad defenseman. He's just not an elite defenseman. So I really think that this could be going either way. We both, all 3 of us want both of them in the lineup starting game 1. How that looks, we'll see. But I really like both the arguments there.
Can I ask? This is a spin-off, if you will, of this question, because we have, as the roster sits right now, the bottom pair is potentially 2 of the 2 we're talking about, Spence, Clark, and Dursey, 3 right shot defensemen. Not only are they 3 right shot defensemen, they're 3 very young defensemen. My question is, do you guys think, and I'd asked this in one of the articles I wrote, because I'm not ruling out the fact that there's another defenseman coming in from outside the organization to play bottom pair to just shore it up a little bit. Do you think Blake and McClellan are the type? Are they going to really roll with a Spence Clark third pair? Are they going to really roll with a Dursey Clark third pair? It feels very off-brand. I feel like there's going to be some sort of I'm not talking a big name guy, but like a lower cost, maybe a veteran type that is only going to be a couple $1 million to help this third pair and kind of anchor the third pair. I actually I know it's crazy with all this other stuff going on with the cap and other rumors that we'll get into, but I don't know. Do you think Blake and the organization will go with these 3 young guys as the bottom pair?
Russ, I'll let you hit that first.
Yeah, I mean, you're 1,000% correct there. I mean, Joe, that would be totally away from the norm of what we've seen from Blake and co. these last few years. They've tended to protect their prospects, but I don't know. I think that's kind of why I fluctuate back to maybe splitting up Gavrikov and Roy. Maybe you give a little bit more protection to a player like Jordan Spence and Brandt Clark by pairing them with a Gavrikov or Roy, however you see fit, and then leaving Dursey on the left side. But yeah, that's a good question, because I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. It's just, do you look at this defensive lineup with, let's just say it's those 7 players with, you can just think about them in your head. I mean, do you see that defensive lineup winning a Stanley Cup?
No.
Neither do
But
I.
what I like about it, because I've talked about, I want more skill in the lineup. And I think there's ways to, even if they stuck with the top 4 as is, right? Anderson, Doughty. I consider me shocked if they split up Gavrikov and Roy, but maybe. I think it makes a lot of sense too when you say, depending on if they want to offer a little protection for Spence and Clark. But I think you can find ways to sprinkle in when there's an offensive zone faceoff. Maybe it's Gavrikov and Spence and not Gavrikov and Roy. Maybe in the different offensive zone faceoff, it's Gavrikov and Clark, or it's Roy and Clark, right? You can break up the pair for a run through the rotation. Maybe if it's late in the game, if it's the third period in the last 10 minutes or so, and the Kings are trailing, they need a goal, you shuffle it up a little bit and you get the skill guys out there, because what do you have to lose? So I think the positive is I of having these two, the youth and the skill in the lineup is, even if they are together on the third pair, you can spot them in various, deploy them in various spots that are beneficial to them. Again, when the Kings need a goal, maybe on a second power play, things like that. So I think you can utilize it. But I don't know. I'm a little I don't know. I don't think it is, Russ, a cup winning decor, because you know what? I think it's in part because.
But that's it. I'm gonna interject here a little bit, because I think that you're thinking of the team now. What is Jordan Spence going to be after 40 games, 60 games, 80 games? What is Brandt Clark going to be? How much more offense is that going to add to the team? The other experiment last year didn't work. Bringing him back for the veteran this or that. He was a liability, flat out, plain and simple. So would we have been better off last season letting Rivalry play the amount of games that Edler played? Probably. We wouldn't have been any worse, right? Well, so when are we going to take the handcuffs off these prospects? I think the question, I think this is another pod topic here, but my question would be, are the LA Kings about to be the LA Rams, where we accumulate all these draft prospects and then trade them away for established players and try to win way just because Doughty and Kopitar are on this lineup?
Well, that's kind of what they've said. Like they're talking about winning. So and I think otherwise, what's the point? Why didn't you trade Doughty and Kopitar? I guess Doughty's impossible because of the contract, but why wouldn't you have really blown the whole thing up and really rebuilt? I think the point was to rebuild, to win with these guys again. Otherwise, I think that's why they're here. The point I would make, and it's probably going to be pretty controversial, is maybe less about the depth of the D, and what I mean by that is like the second and third pairs, but I don't know if the top pair is good enough. Look at some of these top pairs that have run through these playoffs. Look at what Vegas is able to put out there. I'm not sure if it's the top pair that's quite at the level. And again, I like both players. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I don't know. It feels it's a little less than some of the other teams.
Then even more better for the Clark. Right? Because you're looking at all the top defensive pairs have an elite defenseman, and Drew Doughty isn't elite anymore. So is it better to get Clark going and see what he can do, or Jordan Spence I don't think Jordan Spence is ever going to be a number one overall defenseman on the team, but Clark has the potential to be. Is it better to get him ice time rather than rely on an aging Drew Doughty to carry a team in the playoffs?
No, I don't know. I think Doughty said it himself best that he just needs to play better. I don't think you're gonna try to. That's the thing.
Listen, he is the top. He's not moving from that. I'm wondering. I hope that he's got to have that. He's got to find his game like he did for the most of the regular season this year, at least the first half of it.
Yeah, I think he can. It's just I don't think you're gonna hand the keys over to Brandt Clark over Drew Doughty right now, with the hope that Clark can be better than Doughty, because I'm not going to say I think Doughty's the best defenseman on the Kings roster right now. I don't think there's a question in that. So,
but is he Makar? Is he Hedman? Is he?
Well, Theodore? No. How many teams have how many teams have Makar, Hedman, or all those?
But
you're talking about top 10 players.
I would put 12. I would put 12 Doughty or 14 Doughty up in the top 5 defensemen in the NHL. But I would would you put him in that now? Probably not.
I think what you're saying, what you mean, Rando, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm interpreting it as like a big reason the Kings were Cup champions for a couple of years and a dominant team is they had an ace in net, an ace on the blue line, and an ace down the middle. And Doughty, Kopitar, Quick. And they really don't have that right now. They certainly don't have it in goal, although nowadays it maybe is a little bit less. Kopitar, I still think is a 1C. But when you look at the other 1Ds, where does Doughty stack up compared to the other 1Ds in the league? So maybe that's what Brandon's getting at. And again, so that's why I like the idea of having these young guys it can help spell some of the legs for Doughty, right? I mean, maybe he doesn't need to play power play. Again, maybe a crazy statement, a controversial statement, but he's getting up there. He's in such an important piece at 5-on-5 that maybe you help to scale back some of his minutes if you have a Spence or a Clark. And, you can utilize those guys in special teams. Maybe that's an option to just help to ease up some of the minutes for Doughty. He's not getting any younger, so it's going to be tough to ask. Like, I think if you look at Vegas's time on ice, they didn't have guys playing Doughty minutes. You know what I mean? Pietrangelo wasn't playing 28 minutes a night. He didn't have to because the decor was just so deep and solid. So I think that's where it comes into play.
I also think that you're looking at people put so much stock into lines and D pairings. It's like the team is better off if everything is more evened out. Like that means you have way more depth, right? And less time. Like this team isn't going to win a cup with Kopitar and Drew playing 30 minutes a night. Like they need other people to step up. And I think Clark needs ice time. I think Jordan Spence needs ice time. And Joe, you took the words right out of my mouth. If the Kings can have Jordan Spence and Clark be the 1 and 2 on the power play and save some ice time. Now, I'm not saying all the time, but in games we're losing by 4 or 5, or we're winning by 4 or 5, and you really need to just let these guys just play. Like, don't be afraid to shuffle the lines. And I don't know if that's a T-Mac thing. I don't know if it's just a hockey in general thing because I've never coached, but it would seem to be that, hey, we're getting shelled. Let's let the third and fourth line play some more. Like, let's save these legs. Let's let Jordan Spence and Clark go out there and really do those things. But then you're also taking time and practice away out of Drew Doughty's hands to power play or to be the quarterback of the power play. I don't know. I mean, I think, everybody knows I'm the captain of the Clark train here, and I think he could run a power play 1 in the NHL right now. I think he's that good. But just Todd McClellan thinks so.
Yeah, just play their players to their best strengths is what we're saying. I mean, probably what Doughty's best at right now in the NHL is like puck retrievals. It's like the best part of his game. So, I mean, I would say, like, I agree with you, Brandon. I would think Brant Clark and Jordan Spence even could be better power play quarterbacks than Drew Doughty. I would probably even say Sean Dursey even up there in terms of their skill set. And I would leave some of those some of that ice time for more 5-on-5 time for Doughty. I mean, we've said this for how many years now for Kopitar. I mean, there's really no reason to play Kopitar on the penalty kill anymore. You're just forcing him to play time and use more of his legs than he has to when you have other players who can be that.
They're hard minutes too.
Yeah, and they're very hard minutes. And I understand that's like probably what his strength is probably defensive side of his game. But it's also, I mean, you have to have him at 5-on-5 and you have to have him in important situations. And if he's killing penalties all game, it's going to be tough to have him out there.
Are the Kings, I'm going to leave this last little question, maybe a yes or no answer. Are the Kings able to make the playoffs without Kopitar being on the power play, without Doughty being on the power play?
Well, let's keep in mind.
Save the minutes. That's what I'm saying. Save the minutes.
It was really good this year. Remember, like, we waited years to have a really good power play. So
I know is a yes or no question there, Joe.
Yes, I'll say. I mean, are you saying like all the time, or just like spotting them here and there for
spotting them to save the legs?
I'll say yes, but understand that the PP was largely improved this year, and those two were big parts of it.
Yeah, I'll say yes in terms of maybe pulling Doughty back a little bit on the power play, but I think Kopitar still needs to be there. I think his playmaking and his vision are pretty good. I mean, it's kind of hard. I guess I could say that same thing for Doughty, but I think with the players I mentioned in terms of having Brant Clark and Jordan Spence in the wings, I mean, if you're going to have them on the ice and not give them power play opportunities, that seems kind of redundant. I mean, it seems like you're kind of wasting what they're really good at, because I mean, everything I've seen in Ontario with Jordan Spence seems like he's really more than capable than running a power play.
Well, you guys in the chat are killing it, so keep it going there. Let's go into this next part here, but before we do that, we'll call DraftKings in for a line change. Light the lamp during the hockey playoffs, which just ended, DraftKings. New customers can bet $5 and bet up to get score up to $250 in bonus bets instantly. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code THPN. That's code THPN only on DraftKings Sportsbook. Let's get going here. Second one, Iafallo and Victor Arvidsson. Obviously, we moved some cap out to make some moves. Gavrikov got the extension. But, hey, there's a lot of money that could be moved around. Do we need another goalie? Do we need Velarde to sign, a 4x8 like a Caulfield here, or 8x8 like a Caulfield here? What's going on here? We're cap strapped. Who is more essential to the team to keep and then send the other person away to make room for cap? That is what we're doing here. So go ahead, Russ, you're starting this one off.
I think the person to keep here that's more essential, I would say, is Arvidsson. And just I'm kind of basing that a little bit off of what he did last year. I mean, Arvidsson was easily probably our best playmaker, even in the playoffs. I mean, I thought he was one of our best players in the playoffs. And it's just tough because I know he's only got 1 year left. And it doesn't really, I mean, if you had me to put money on it, I would say he's probably not going to re-sign with the Kings just because I think he's going to outperform his cost here or what they'd be willing to pay him. So, but I mean, if the Kings are looking to win, I think Arvidsson gives you the best opportunity to do so.
I would say the reason to keep Iafallo in this is because he's a much more well-rounded player in terms of he plays both ends of the ice. He can slot anywhere in the lineup. I guess not to say Arvidsson couldn't, but he can slot anywhere in the lineup, and he's got the extra year. I think Russ mentioned on a prior pod that he, Blake's a guy that likes his assets and the control of his assets, and he's got 2 years left on that deal, does Iafallo. So maybe you could look at it to where it buys a little bit of time for the Kings to figure a little bit out. So I think in that sense, when I look at what the roster is and the way how versatile Iafallo is and playing both wings up and down the lineup, and I think I was going to say he's probably been a little bit healthier than Arvidsson, but I don't know. Maybe not. In the last couple of years, Iafallo's had some injury issues, but maybe the extra year is what makes Iafallo a little bit more trustworthy to keep, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think both here have their ups and downs. You look at VA, way more dominant, more consistent in the playoffs, but the versatility of Iafallo makes sense, and I think the roster construction. Where if we were to move somebody out, obviously somebody has to step in. So what does the rest of the construction look like for our roster? I think you could argue that Samuel Fagemo could bring a similar aesthetic to the lineup as Victor Arvidsson. But is there really a player on the reign that's ready to digest real minutes that could do what Iafallo does on a day-to-day basis?
It's hard to see that. No.
Yeah,
and listen, I'll be honest too, though, even at putting Fagemo in for like Arvidsson's say, that's still a tall task. Guy hasn't played a full season yet in the NHL. That's a tall ask. I mean, it's even a tall ask for Kaliev. We saw Kaliev struggle when he moved up in the lineup. So I do agree, though, Randon, that there's options. And at some point we have to see if these guys can play. But I think to answer the question, Randon, as to what does it mean for the rest of the lineup, that depends. What are you moving out the space for? Are you moving out the space for somebody we're going to talk about later? Are you moving out the space for a goalie? Because if it's for a forward, well, that changes things. If it's for a goalie, it just depends on who's coming in with that space.
Well, where do you think the depth of the prospect pool can absorb? What kind of player do you think they can? Do we have more scorers? Do we have more universal players? Right? Because if Alex Turcotte is healthy, dude, that guy's a scrappy guy, offense, defense. He's not, though, right?
Yeah,
so
but he's not.
You have those things. Is Jared Anderson-Dolan able to have real minutes to where he could play a similar style to Iafallo, being that jigsaw piece in multiple lines? He has that talent, but he's not as defensively sound as Iafallo, right? So we're going to be obviously missing something from the team if we ship either of these out.
Mm-hmm.
But where do you think the depth of the Kings can absorb the hit the least, I guess, if depending on the player moved out? Russ, what do you think?
Well, I think it's scoring. I think it is what it is. And if you're looking at trying to make up for what you're going to lose, whether it's from if you trade Iafallo or Arvidsson, I think could the Kings' ability to provide more offense that we've seen, especially last season, would be able to make up for losing a player like Arvidsson. I mean, from what I saw in Iafallo, he comes across to me as a big game type of player. Like we saw Iafallo take another step in this last playoff series against the Oilers. I thought he played really well. I think he was second on the team in goals with 3 goals in the 6 games, and of course big goals too with the game winner in game 1 and whatnot. But yeah, so I mean, when I see Iafallo, he almost brings that kind of hard nosed type of play, as opposed to, but with Arvidsson, it's almost like that kind of finesse style where it's almost like a clunky finesse style too with Arvidsson, but he always seems to get it done. I mean, he had that excellent pass across the ice. I forget which game it was, but yeah. So he's shown that capability to play make. But we have a lot of scorers in the forward group now. I mean, you have Kevin Fiala playing third line minutes. You have Gabe Vilardi who was playing third line minutes, and it got to a point where we even had to put Iafallo up on the first line just because Byfield wasn't able to perform.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. It's tough. You can make an argument for both of them, and I'm glad. I like this we can see both sides here, but for me, I don't know. I just like a lot of the aspects that Iafallo brings, and he brings that big game mentality to the ice.
Can I say too, and this is, I think Russ and I almost have like sort of almost flipped here and there. He how much he likes Iafallo. Am I crazy to say if Iafallo is the one to deal, it actually offers the Kings a little bit more flexibility in a shorter time, because now you've got 2 players making $4+ million off the books next year. Like Iafallo will still be, if you trade Iafallo, there's his money off the books, and then you only have Arvidsson for 1 more year. So it's really only 1 more year of 1 more player at that $4 million hit. So maybe it opens up a little bit of flexibility a little bit sooner to say, okay, rather than have Iafallo for another year after that, we got 2 spots basically opened up here within 2 seasons, and backfill those with, again, the youth that Randon is talking about that has been praised for the last decade, it seems, by every prospect reporter. Does that make sense?
I do. I like that take there, Joe, because roster construction is going to be huge. Everybody's saying, hey, the cap's going to go up, but really, when is it going to go up, right? Like they thought it was going to go up this year. It's only going to go up, like $1 million or so. So who knows? Maybe next year it doesn't go up again, because they blame this or that or whatever. I like that, because then it frees up $8 million. So is that after a 80-point Byfield season this year to where he needs some money? Is that after Vilardi,
Right.
backloading that deal? Is that bringing in another player? Because then you also have Kopitar going from 11 million to what, maybe 6 or 7. That's enough. So you're looking at 13, 14, 15 million of free money going out there to better this team. This team can look significantly different if they decide to deal Iafallo versus Victor Arvidsson. I think that's a very interesting point, Joe.
Yeah, but if you lose both of them though next year, I think both of them give you an opportunity to win now more than they would 2 younger players.
Well, so I think that the idea, at least for where I'm coming from with that, is for 2023-24, if we assume that one of these guys is gone because to open up space for something else, be it a goalie, be it a defenseman, be it a forward, that my argument for Iafallo, if I were to make one, because how much I agree with your takes on Arvidsson, that I think he's overall a better player, is that it gives it now we get another year where Byfield, Vilardi, Kaliev, Kupari, Fagemo, Chromiak, all these prospects have another year to play professional. So then Arvidsson may be gone, but hopefully one of these guys is ready to step into a larger role, even if it's not like a first line role. If it's a middle 6 role, you would really hope that at some point some of these guys are ready to do that, because otherwise, again, topic for another pod, then we've missed big time on a lot of different prospects. So, you know what I'm saying? So I think, and again, look at the way teams win cups. Like, you need cheap guys, and all those guys would be cheap playing. They don't have to play impact roles, but complementary roles. Like hypothetically, if somebody's on a second line with Deneau and Fiala, say, they can be a good complementary player, right? They don't have to drive the line per se. Byfield was a really good player for a lot of the regular season with Kopitar and Kempe. It's not as if we all wanted him to produce more, but it was working while he was producing the way he was. And eventually the idea is next season, maybe he produces a double the points type of thing, right? So that's that. I think I'm looking at it in that lens is it's either they can go younger or again, they go make an aggressive trade, for example, to bring somebody in. So
I think we do a whole pod. I think we do a whole pod on can the Kings be the Rams of the NHL and just deal everybody?
I think fans are just waiting for a prospect to just bang on the door, just like
we've been talking
demand
about this.
that ice time, right?
All the top 10 picks, Byfield, Turcotte, Clark, and Velarde, like we need 2 out of the 4 to hit in a major way for the rebuild to be successful. Like I understand like you're going to get players here and there and there's underdog stories or whatever, but you're looking at the players that drive the NHL are generally top 10 picks, right? So Eichel, Las Vegas, 2 overall, weird stat right here. This is kind of cool. The second player drafted after all the Edmonton first overall picks have won a cup, and none of the Edmonton players have won a cup.
I saw that.
So, and then Anthony coming in here. Well, maybe 15 million. That sounds like enough for Austin Matthews. So maybe there's some math there that can make that worth math for Matthews. But I just think it's very interesting here because I really do think the Kings organization has gotten comfortable with the potential of winning seasons and all that kind of stuff because none of us thought that the team was a cup team, and then we were all like, hey, it's a weak Pacific Division. Well, who won the Stanley Cup? Vegas in the Pacific Division. Who went far? That was Edmonton. Like the Pacific Division wasn't as weak as we thought. And so it's not going to continue to be as weak as we thought either. That means the Kings have to be aggressively more in that division to even make waves going on. Just like I don't want to be the type of team like the Minnesota Vikings who is like, oh, we're good in the regular season, we never make waves, because that's what the
Sharks.
That's what that's a deep dive there that I love. Thank you, Russ, for that. But I just don't want to be that team where we're good in the regular season, we never make waves in the playoffs because we're afraid to make moves. You know who wasn't afraid to make moves? Vegas. They just made all the moves whatsoever. They said, F the cap. They said, we're going to get good guys in here and we're going to make it work. So is that
what is a prospect? That's what Vegas says.
Yeah. So is that the MO? Is that building it from the bottom? Is that, there's all kinds of ways to skin a cat, as they say, even though I've never skinned a cat. But I just think that there's something to be hard to look at because right now, I think the Kings are on a fence and they don't know what side they want to be on. And if you're not on any side, then you're not doing anything 100%, and this team's just going to be in limbo. And that's something I'm afraid of. Okay, we have to win a cup for Kopitar. Oh, we have to let these prospects nurture. We have to do – it's like, yeah, I understand all that. And it all seems good, and you can make all the points in your head, but eventually the team's got to make a decision to go forward. Hey, we signed Deneau. We're going to maybe trade for a guy that we're going to talk about later. Hey, we need an elite goalie. We need this and that. Hey, this and that. Kopitar is getting all we want. All that good stuff, all that noise. But I'm not okay with 100-point seasons. I want a ring and I want another ring on the finger. I want to hoist the cup. I want to be able to go to LA this time because I didn't have enough money back in the days of 12 and 14 to pay for playoff tickets, and maybe I still don't, considering that Game 5 tickets by the glass were $20K. But that's something that they should aspire for. So let's move on to the next round here because we got a couple more topics and we're already almost at an hour here. Next one, goalie decision. So we have Copley and there for our goalies for next season. We've talked about the bargain bin route, and there's been plenty of trade talk going on about whether we should trade for Soros or Hellebuck or anything like that. So Joe, I think you have been the bargain bin guy all season. I think you're going to take that side, aren't you?
Well, I was going to take the side of it, whether we go UFA or trade. And I was going to say trade, but here's the thing, Brandon.
Okay.
I actually don't necessarily subscribe to trade for Hellebuck or trade for Saros or trade for one of the top guys. I will be more willing to trade for an Ilya Samsonov from Toronto, an RFA. I'd be more willing to trade for a Mackenzie Blackwood in New Jersey, an RFA. Two guys that may need to relocate depending on what their teams do with their goaltending. So I actually I'm okay still with the bargain if they do it right. And I actually would prefer, I'm okay going the trade route to do so. And there's a few options in the trade route that I think could be available in the market that I would do. And I've long been a Mackenzie Blackwood fan. I think he's battled some injuries and some inconsistent play, but I think in a Kings, the way they play, their defensive structure, New Jersey plays a little bit more up and at 'em style, especially and then before the last few years prior to this one, they weren't very good at all. But Mackenzie Blackwood, he's a talented goalie, good size to him. He's had a really good season under his belt in the NHL. He's capable. And I think he could be a decent option to go, split 60-40, 55-45 with a Phoenix Copley. And I don't think the Kings would be that bad off for it.
I mean, for me, I'm going to go even more bargain here. And it's weird because I've kind of come around to the notion where I think the Kings already have their opening night starter in net on the roster in Copley. And I don't see any reason to why you'd have to pay more money to go out and get a bigger name goalie, especially from what we've seen in the playoffs this past year. I mean, you just saw Aiden Hill, who was traded for a 4th round pick, who's kind of a nobody, beat Sergei Bobrovsky, who's getting paid $10 million a year. I mean, yeah, Bobrovsky maybe has a little bit more of a dangerous past to him, but I mean, it is what it is in terms of what we've seen in some of these Stanley Cup playoffs these last couple years.
Who was the goalie for the Lightning when they won their multiple championships?
One of the best goalies of all time. That's a little different. But even Darcy Kemper after that against Colorado, that was kind of a nobody. I'm going to say nobody. Yeah, Bennington before that. AHL goalie.
The exception. Vasilevsky is the exception.
We had the conversation.
So Jonathan Quick wasn't a top 5 goalie in the NHL when he won?
Homegrown goalie drafted by the team. That's a little different too. But
he was still making top dime when he won the cup.
Yeah, and that was because I think that's a little different when you're drafting a goalie and nurturing him and developing him yourself, as opposed to where the Kings are right now. I mean, the Kings don't have anybody that they can call up or that they feel comfortable to call up in their own system. I mean, as much as I love Villalta, I wouldn't want him backing up Copley day one. So, I mean, for me, I think it's just you go with like what I was gonna say was we've had the conversation where we were wondering what would have happened in the series if Copley had started a couple games, just because of you brought in Korpisalo, who's had 80+ save performance in the playoffs, but what would have Copley have done? Would he have made that save against Hyman in overtime? I don't know. Would he have made that save against Evander Kane in Game 6? Who knows? But I don't know. So I think if the Kings were playing so well, I mean, they went on a 12 game point streak in March with Copley as their goalie. I mean, and Korpisalo kind of backing him up, and those were both kind of less than $3 million a year. I wouldn't be too disappointed if they went out and got another goalie who's getting paid $1 or $1.5 million a year and save some of that money to bring in another left shot defenseman that we were talking about earlier, or maybe even another high profile forward that we're thinking of. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I would say the downside to that is when it comes to playoffs, coaches are just so reluctant to alternate. They're going to go pick a guy. And I think the idea is doing what we want to do. I don't think any of us want Phoenix Copley playing 55 games this year. I don't think any of us would want, in my example, a Blackwood or a Samsonov playing 55 games this year. Yet they could be asked to play 20 plus 30 games in playoffs if the goalie, if a team wants to ride a goalie. Like, And so if you're going to do that and play the 1A, 1B game in regular season, you've got to be willing to do that in playoffs. And I think that's right now where we haven't gotten there really yet with teams that are willing to do that. So if you're going to go the bargain route, which I think I'm on board with, you have to be willing to go that route and alternate if need be. But it's a things that you don't see happen very often.
I still have Cal PTSD is what I have. I'm kind of reluctant to give another goalie a large contract right now, or even pay for a goalie. That's why, like, when I see the Connor Hellebuck talk, I mean, I'm like, 1 year left. He's going to be UFA. You're going to have to resign him if you want to trade for him now, because you don't want another Milan Lucic kind of situation. So, would you be willing to give Hellebuck $7 million a year? It's a risk, and I don't think it's a risk I'd be willing to take.
Yeah, and
none of you have the huevos to go the top shelf, so I'm going to do it because this is supposed to be a debate here, and you guys are just bromancing over there. So I'm gonna say this: Corey Crawford, right? 3 cups, second round pick, top. He was a top elite goalie for most of his career during at least the cup run. You have Vasilevsky, and then multiple finals. You have players that were all drafted in the first round. I think you're looking at, it can get done when you have a lot of elite pieces everywhere. But do we think the Kings have a lot of elite pieces everywhere? No, I don't think we do. I don't think we do have elite pieces anymore. Aging Doughty, aging Kopitar. You have Fiala's going to have to carry this team. None of the prospects have really made a second step. The only way the Kings are making noise in the playoffs is if an elite goalie gets hot at the right time, and UC Saros or Hellebuck can make that happen. So if we're really trying to win right now, and you're trying to piece together and make yourself feel good about all these bargain goalies getting wins in the regular season, that's not what it's about. You need a guy that's going to step up, put his huevos on the table, and carry a team during the playoffs. And that ain't any of the guys that you mentioned. It's going to be UC Saros or Hellebuck for this team. End note. Mic drop. Let's go.
I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying in terms of that. Like, you could find Hellebuck and ride him through the playoffs. You get Saros here, ride him through the playoffs. I think that's I won't sit here and argue that they're not better goalies than the rest. It's just at their price tag, are you limiting yourself to what you could add to a forward group? I guess if you were to start, this is not totally off topic, but like if you were to pick pick a guy to start a franchise with, do you start the franchise with a high-end player like Jack Eichel, or do you start a franchise with Vasilevsky?
But this isn't Chell, Joe.
That'd be a good debate, actually. I mean,
this isn't NHL. This is real life. And right now, the Kings aren't elite.
But I guess what I'm saying is
the only way they're going to win a cup is if they have an elite goalie.
My point is if you can go cheap in net, it gives you more money to spend for an impact player elsewhere in the lineup that are playing more minutes, that are going to be playing in more roles and bigger roles. That the goalie, I think, as long as the Kings have
lefty. Oh wait, we already signed a guy lefty. We already signed 2 guys lefty. Oh, you're talking about forward. Oh, we have Dano and we have an aging Kopitar. Where are we putting these impact players that you're talking about? Oh, Fiala's there, right? Like there's no money. There's already money generated in those spots. What I'm saying is there's zero money. Copley, hey, this newsflash right now. Copley might have been an anomaly last season. He might be straight trash next season. So we're going to have another bargain bin old goalie to try to carry a team that you're expecting to only maybe do 30, 40, 45 games. And if Copley's trash, he's doing 50, 60 now. Then we're putting their team in a bind, and then we're going to have to do another series here. The Kings have already traded away multiple firsts. I wasn't a fan of it. Fiala, fine. Phenomenal trade. Well worth it. This last first, I was not a fan of it for Gavrikov, even though he re-signed. I feel like the team could have got better regardless. But if you're saying that Hellebuck or Saros, who's an elite goalie, his entire career, you trade 2 firsts and multiple prospects for, great. Get it done. Because he could still be goalie for the next 5, 6, 7 years for this team. Not a problem. And so I don't understand the hesitation of going out and getting a guy like that. because it's like, oh yeah, we can piece it together. We're trying to do this. That's just couch GMs like we are, I guess, here at Hockey Royalty, saying that we can make ourselves feel better about that. But realistically, we don't have Nathan McKinnon. We don't have Jack Eichel on our team to carry this team. Our D-core isn't even close to as good as Colorado or Vegas. So you're gonna need a goalie to ride and be an elite player to carry this team, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, the only thing that scares me, it's funny because I don't think Hellebuck's going to be as expensive as anybody thinks he is. I mean, he's a pending UFA.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of made it known he doesn't really want to be there.
I think he's 32. It's not like he's
not a young guy. I mean, everybody's kind of getting scared of goalies. Everyone else is GMs are seeing who's winning Stanley Cups. I mean, with Aiden Hill, obviously, and Darcy Kemper the year before that. So this notion that Hellebuck's going to cost like first round picks and prospects, I don't think it's going to be that expensive. I mean, you could probably even get John Gibson for pretty cheap. I mean, I was listening to a Ducks podcast, and they were talking about retaining money for Gibson because of how bad he was. So it's like
I would be all in on that.
Yeah, I think goalies aren't that price tag with what the player would want is probably what scares me more than what the actual cost to acquire him would be. And that's where I'm with Joe. I mean, you look at some of these other teams and they're just deep. I mean, I'll ask you this, Brandon. Do you think the Kings are a Stanley Cup team if they just had Connor Hellebuck in net right now with the roster they have right now?
They stand a better chance.
But
100%.
We're talking about rings. Do you think they win a Stanley Cup with Connor Hellebuck in net? Or they can win a Stanley Cup?
Would they have beaten Edmonton? Would they have beaten Edmonton
easily? I think they would have beaten Edmonton.
Oof, I don't know. I don't see it. I just think they're still.
You don't think that he's that much more better than Korpisalo or Copley to where like,
no, I'm not saying
he's.
I think he's way better than those two players, than those two goalies. It's just I don't see the team as a whole being better with just Hellebuck in net when you're not addressing, like we were talking about, with having maybe another left shot defenseman or having maybe another bottom six center that you can rely on as opposed to a player like Kupari or even the other player we're going to talk about here in a little bit. So I think there's other places and other pieces you can get. I mean, let's say that Hellebuck wants $7 million a year in his next deal. I mean, I'd rather spend $1.5 million a year on a goalie and pay $5 million for another solid winger or solid center. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at in that whole conversation.
Do you ever have to worry about UC Saros being effective?
No.
Do you ever have to worry about Hellebuck being effective in that?
No, I think he's played more games than everybody. That's another thing with Hellebuck too. He's played more minutes than any other goalie. So that, I mean, you're talking about like with same thing that they're talking about with running backs in the NFL. I mean, who knows what the kind of how many more legs he's got underneath him. But yeah, with Saros, I guess you can have that conversation. I'm
just saying you're looking at these guys. You don't have to worry about them. Yeah, they're going to be in the top 10 every year in effectiveness. Yeah, whether you're going to be truly elite and taking away games like Jonathan Quick or Vasilevsky, that remains to be seen. But you always know they're going to show up to the table. If Kings fans think Copley is going to be the guy that he was last year, you are dreaming. There's a better chance that he is the AHL goalie that we signed versus the all-star that he was last year. And so this team, if we're going to be effective in the Pacific, which is way better than what people think, you're going to need a goalie that's going to be effective. Now, whether that's Varlamov, whether that's the bargain bin, and you play 40-40 and just hope for the best, I get it. Or if it's hey, let's go get UC Saros, and he plays 50 games, and Copley plays the rest, but we ride Saros in the playoffs to give him some rest, I'm 100% fine with that. So, I don't know. I think that truthfully, my true opinion is I think you can go either way, and there's multiple ways to construct a team, obviously. But I don't think if I'm really arguing the situation, all the teams that have had cheap goalies like Aiden Hill or Kemper have been elite at every other part of the team, and they were able to overcome that. And I don't think that's the Los Angeles Kings at this moment.
One last thing I'll say is, I mean, Copley wasn't an all-star goal. I mean, he was mediocre at best.
He was competent. He was giving the Kings average goal.
And they were winning games with him. I mean, he was like, I'm looking at it right now. He's 24th in goals saved above expected per 60 for all goalies who played 20 games. So that's where the team has that right now. They don't need to rely on a Jonathan Quick to steal games for them 3-2, 2-1. They can score 4 or 5 goals a night and then still win games and give up 3 goals.
But Russ, are you trying to win games or are you trying to win cups?
Do a little bit,
I would say of the ones to acquire, Randon, I think Hellebuck would be the cheapest as he's a pending UFA. I mean, Saros has got a couple years. Demko, who you guys know I love, he's got like 4 more years. So I think those guys would be a little bit more costly. Saros has been such a huge part of that whole franchise that I think they would try to, if they're going to trade him, they're reloading and like rebuilding. So they're going to try to get a bundle. And I don't know that the Kings have it anymore because of some of the picks they've dealt. So I don't know that they have the goods to acquire Saros, but they may to acquire Hellebuck.
So I think. Speaking of acquiring people across the north.
Could have Wallstead.
But then we wouldn't have Clark.
Ooh, I could have that debate.
No, they could have had Wallstead by really
if they
offering more money.
Really wanted to go for it and trade back in the first round. Yeah.
All right, this last topic here: PLD or not to PLD? That is the question. That's Pierre-Luc Dubois. So obviously upset. He's always upset. He's never happy as a hockey player or as a human being. But he's trying to go into his third team here. And but hey, third overall pick. He is a center, I guess. I wouldn't call him elite or not, in my opinion. But we'll talk about this going forward. Joe, I know you're a huge PLD fan, but you're taking the no PLD on this debate. Why shouldn't the Kings trade for Pierre-Luc Dubois?
There's a few reasons for the Kings not to make this trade. One is the acquisition cost. Unlike, I think he is going to be somebody that is going to cost. It may make sense for the Kings to trade Gabriel Velarde in this deal because, again, I don't know how you sign both of these guys. We're talking about not having cap space. I don't know how you bring in Pierre-Luc Dubois, sign him to an extension, presumably, and then also sign Gabe Velarde, unless they're going to somehow be able to pull off a Mikey Anderson agreement with Gabe Velarde. So I think the acquisition cost, both from the players, which could be, again, Velarde plus a prospect and a pick maybe, or you're probably going to have to send some money, so maybe it's an Arvidsson or an Iafallo to bring him in, is going to be heavy. Then again, what's the contract that he gets? I know Elliot Friedman has speculated it's in that, it could hit $9 million. Russ, I think you shared Evolving Hockey. It could actually be less than that. I kind of think he's going to get like an $8 million deal. So again, he's a locked in top 6 center, and whether or not he's able to make that jump to elite first line center, he's only 24. And again, I think people forget how young he actually really is. He's 24, turning 25, he's not that much younger or older, I should say, than Gabe Velarde. But is he able, or will he be willing to take that next step to be that bona fide first line center to take over for Anze Kopitar in a couple of years? I think it's a reasonable question. And somebody mentioned it in this chat, like, hey, Austin Matthews just might hit free agency. So if you sign Dubois, you might not have the money for Matthews. So I will end it with that. So there's largely around acquisition cost, about not acquiring Pierre-Luc Dubois.
Russ, what's the reason why we should say yes?
I'm all for Pierre-Luc Dubois. And the reason we're talking about this is Elliot Friedman's mentioned in the 32 Thoughts podcast that he does with Jeff Merrick, is that he's hearing that from teams around the league that the Kings are going to be all in or going to go really heavy on trying to get Dubois from Winnipeg. And when I heard that, it caught me off guard, because obviously you look at the salary cap situation with the Kings right now, and like what Joe said, I think I'm kind of with you when I think he's going to get probably like an 8x8, so $64 million deal, which I think he probably deserves. I mean, 24-year-old player, top 6. He's been a producer ever since he's jumped in the NHL. But then I thought about it, and I'm like, man, it makes all the sense in the world for them to acquire a bona fide top 6 center like Pierre-Luc Dubois. And let me tell you why. Anze Kopitar, obviously the Kings' number 1 center, has probably only got 2, maybe 3 years left at being the Kings' bona fide number 1 center. Are we truly in the mindset that Quentin Byfield will be that number 1 center when Kopitar is gone? Because I'm not there yet. I haven't seen it from Byfield. Obviously, I'm not saying that he can be or it can't be, but I'm still waiting for Byfield to take that next step. So let's say Kopitar does walk and you don't have a player like Dubois in the midst or anything like that, then you're stuck with the hope that Quentin Byfield is just going to take those reins over and be that player that we're hoping to replace in Anze Kopitar. When you bring in a player like Dubois, you kind of bridge that gap even further for Byfield. And you have, let's say Dubois is in the lineup. You have Dubois signed, and you have a replacement for Kopitar. When Kopitar leaves in 3 years, you have a 27-year-old Pierre-Luc Dubois who's just going right into the prime of his career. Then you have a 24-year-old Quentin Byfield just kind of getting there started. And then you have like Philip Deneau, who's going to be 30, 31, just kind of could be that perfect third-line center, that Jared Stahl center that the Kings had in their Stanley Cup run. So for me, I mean, I think if the Kings and Rob Blake can just make it work salary cap-wise, and I'll talk about that too, if they can make it work salary cap-wise, I think there's no question that the Kings should be all over Pierre-Luc Dubois, because I just get that Jack Eichel like thought where we talked about trying to go for, if a player like Jack Eichel is available, you have to go all in for that type of player, especially a player that can play center and be that number 1 player that the Kings need probably when Kopitar leaves. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I'm just with Pierre-Luc Dubois all the way. And I don't think the cost to acquire him will be even Gabe Vilardi. I think the Kings can make it work with even less than that because of the whole notion of him wanting to leave. I mean, Pat Brisson even made it known. Everybody in the NHL knows that he wants to leave. So I don't think it'll cost a player like Gabe Vilardi. I mean, the Kings got a top 10 winger in Kevin Fiala for a first-round pick, a 19th overall pick, and Brock Faber, who was a second-round pick, a defenseman. So it's kind of the same situation. So I think it'll be a little bit more than that, but I don't think it'll be a player like Vilardi that the Kings will have to part ways with to acquire him.
I just wonder if they're able to do both, sign both. I mean, because I don't know that Vilardi takes a Mikey Anderson handshake deal, because Vilardi's got a lot of injury baggage, and he may want to. I know he only has so much that he can do. He's an RFA. It's not like he's got a whole lot of say here, but I just wonder if he'll be a little bit more willing to push for a bigger contract. I'm going to put this in the chat because I'll be honest.
There we go. Trapper9 says unsubscribe to NHL Russell. We gotta take care, because he is out of his mind. And I'm gonna get my thought here. Pierre Dubois, he is not a number 1 center. He's not even a number 2 center in this league. I think he's vastly overrated. He's a whiner. He hasn't carried any team to anything in his entire career. Offering him $8 million is travesty. You're looking at players like Kevin Fiala, almost a point per game player, getting less than $8 million. And we're going to offer a guy who's barely scraped 60 points in his entire career with Winnipeg, who is a playoff team, who had Kyle Connor, one of the best offensive weapons in the league, playing with him, and he can't even do a point per game. You're looking at Vilardi, who was on pace to have 53 points. That's 7 less than Pierre-Luc Dubois, and he's not going to cost $8 million. And you're bridging the gap. That's not a bridge. 8 years isn't a bridge. That's a monument in LA. So if you're really bringing this guy in, like, what is he bringing to this team? He's not a competitor. Hasn't shown he can carry. All he's asked to do is be traded away because he can't make it work where he's at. I think he's a locker room cancer based on what I've seen on the outside. And is that reality? I don't really know. Do the Kings have other guys that can do that? I just think people are so scared at Kopitar digressing, and I am too. I brought it up last year. I brought it up a year before. Where's the next step for the Kings after Kopitar leaves? I understand that sentiment, but I don't think PLD is it. I don't think he'll ever lead a team to a Stanley Cup. And you're saying Eichel? Eichel was a point per game player. Pierre-Luc Dubois was never a point per game player, and he was a point per game player in Buffalo. which, no offense, Joe, they're straight trash. Like Winnipeg was a contending team. Buffalo's never made the playoffs with Eichel there. Like, they didn't have the rosters around him. So I just don't understand where this PLD love is. Like, third overall pick, I get it. Like, he has the potential. He's young. I just don't think he is that in this league. Now, like, I don't where he's not the next in command. Like, I just don't understand where this. Hey, I understood Eichel. Hey, if Eichel's healthy, he could lead a team going forward. I get that. Hey, Patrick Kane, not Patrick Kane, but Panemi. He is a guy. He's a scorer. He's an elite scorer. He's in the prime of his career. New York, sign him, make that chance. Go and get the guy.
Oh, Panarin.
Panarin, yeah, not Panemi. Panarin. So a lot of names I'm throwing around here. So I just don't think. I'm sorry, I'm in mid rant. Like, my brain is solid rant right now, not name. So I just don't get it. I just don't think that there is any room for him financially or physically on this roster, because, like, what are we really doing? Like, he's not going to change the landscape. He is not even close to Kopitar. Joe, you think for $8 million he's going to change the landscape of this team? Come on.
I think he changed the landscape. If you look at the lines that you could move the Kings' second line this year, and that's their third line next year. That's what Pierre-Luc Dubois would do, and that's a dynamite top six if you were to do that. And I'm going to push back a little bit on the points. I'm a little surprised at the amount of Kings fans that are questioning the point production of Dubois. Anze Kopitar was
that's what I'm saying too. Thank you so much, Joe. Thank you so much.
One time a point per game guy, because he was a 200-foot player. Now, I don't know that Dubois is yet the Selke 200-foot player that Kopitar is, but he is of that mold, of that 200-foot centerman. So him getting 60 to 70 points, Anze Kopitar lived in there for quite a while. He spiked in the 70s. He hit 80 a couple of times. I know he had the 190-point season, but it's not as if Anze Kopitar has been like this dynamite point producer throughout his career. He's been a solid point producer, but it means so much because of how well he plays defensively. And the other thing I'll push back on is, listen, these players don't have a whole lot of say ever, especially the first 7 years of their career. So you have a guy who, he's not the first guy to have run-ins with John Tortorella. And Winnipeg has been a mess before he got there. There's been talks of that team being a mess for before Dubois got there. Not only that, but how many times have we seen Jeff Carter asked for, he could have been considered, and probably was considered, a baby coming out of Columbus. Wasn't he and Mike Richards cancers coming out of Philadelphia? I think that worked out okay for Los Angeles. Didn't Matthew Tkachuk just say he wanted out of Calgary? He didn't get along with the people. Why force a trade? Does that make him a bad teammate? I think he had a pretty good season too. Jack Eichel himself is despised in Buffalo because of how that ended. I think things ended up okay there. He wasn't exactly a cancer there. I think when you go to a place that has a leadership group of Anze Kopitar, Drew Doughty, Philippe Deneau's there, Dubois, guys like that, Eichel, they don't need, like, Eichel went to a spot where he didn't have to be the guy. He didn't have to be the captain. Mark Stone's there. Marchessault's there. Petrangelo's there. Martinez is there. They have veteran guys there. Dubois is coming into a situation where he can just, he doesn't have to be the first line center right away. Kopitar's there. He slots in at number 2. And I mean, like, it was like, to me, it's a no-brainer, and I just really push back on the whole he's a quitter, he's a locker room guy, he's this, because you could have easily, and it was just as easily said that about a lot of other guys, and it's worked out perfectly fine for a lot of teams, including the LA Kings, mind you, who brought in guys like that.
Tkachuk was never a locker room guy.
But my point is he demanded a trade. He wanted to out.
Yeah.
I mean, what does that make him? He was drafted by the team and demanded a trade. Like, again, Dubois is in a situation, was drafted by Columbus. He's not the first guy to want out of Columbus. Everybody wants out of Columbus. Again, Jeff Carter was pouting around Columbus when he was there until he got out.
He was there for a microcosm,
and threw a fit
And,
the second he
hated
got
it.
there. So
he was booed from in Columbus every time he went back there.
yeah, so like
I just look at last season. You look at Dubois wasn't even top. He was barely top 10 on his entire team, not even in the league in individual points produced. Like he's not a producer. Like and he had a lot of offensive weapons in Winnipeg. Like where are we thinking that he's going to all of a sudden change his game to be a producer? Kopitar was a top 3 in his team in individual points produced.
On a team
Pierre-Luc Dubois on a team that could score. The Kings can score.
Oh, you mean this year?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant Kopitar. Like
no, but Pierre-Luc Dubois is 10th on his team in individual points produced, where he was individually affecting the play in the points 5-on-5, and like top 10, like you're barely top 10. You're skinking in, and he had way more minutes than everybody else. I just don't think he's elite. I don't think he's worth 8 years in any aspect.
And I look at what happened. Look, that environment in Winnipeg, something's up there. Paul Maurice quit mid-season 2 years ago.
Do you hear Bonus's end of season conference too?
Not even end of season. Rick Bonus throughout the season called guys out, and it wasn't just Dubois. It was the other guys again.
It's got to be Wheeler or Shifley, one of those two.
And again, I'm not like there's that whole environment in Winnipeg just seems not a good place. And then Russ, as you mentioned, the end of the season press conference when Bonus made his comments, and it was Wheeler, I think, that was like that. He didn't have to do that. Don't think he had to do. So there's obviously tension in that organization, and Bonus isn't going anywhere. So, he's also not the first person to want out of Winnipeg. So the guy's asking for trades from 2 places, Columbus and Winnipeg, that nobody ever wants to be at. So I don't know. I'm not going to kill him for that.
Even Winnipeg didn't want to be in Winnipeg at one point. No, but I mean, I just go back, like the thing with, if you bring in PLD, he's not going to be the guy that's going to be looked at to be that point producer. I mean, that's why you have Adrian Kempe. That's why you have Kevin Fiala. Hopefully you can keep Gabe Vilardi if you do make a trade like this situation. So, I mean, I just look at that lineup. I mean, if you have Quentin Byfield in the first line, you have Byfield, Kopitar, Kempe, and you have a second line of Fiala,
Dubois,
PLD, and Vilardi. And then you can have the nice line. Maybe Arvidsson gets traded or IFL gets traded. You kind of interchange one of those as the third line. Dude, that's probably one of the best forward cores in the Western Conference, maybe even the entire league.
And then
I think he's $2 million overpaid.
It is kind of, that's why I agree with that. Like I shared that Evolving Hockey screenshot, and it has him around what was it, like 6.7 even, or like 7 or something?
It might even be less than that. It might be less than that. I'll look for
something around that. But the thing is like
Winnipeg's not a bad offense. Like where are we talking about? Like he's either he is or isn't that guy. Like, and I think you have a lot of in sports where you're like, oh, this guy's on, like he's on a Mike Evans for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? 9 straight years of over 1,000 yards, but he's never an elite top 5 guy. Like he's not a guy that's going to carry a team. He's always been solid. There's nothing wrong with that. PLD is probably going to have a solid career, but is he a guy that can carry a team? He's not Andrei Kopitar. He's never shown he can be Andrei Kopitar. So where are we doing here? Are we trying to win a cup next year and the year after when Kopitar is still in the twilight of his career that he can provide something? Because after that, like it's Dubois and that's it. Like where's the rest of the team here at that point?
But that's where Russ is. That's the bridge. So you have
that's not a bridge. 8 years is not a bridge. 8 years is a staple.
You're bridging the Kopitar. You're bridging the Kopitar gap, and then you're waiting for Byfield to develop. Because if Kopitar leaves and Byfield's not a number 1 center like we've talked about, you're stuck. You're stuck with Philip Deneau as your number 1 center. I would rather
rebuild then. Like if
nobody wants to go through that. Nobody wants to do that.
But if PLD is not that guy, then you're always going to be mediocre. You're always going to be so making the playoffs but not winning.
This whole conversation of PLD is not the guy. He's never going to lead a team. He's like, everybody was saying the same exact thing, and I know they're 2 different players. Everybody was saying the same exact thing about Jack Eichel. Exactly, they were saying the same exact things. And I know he's a better producer. I know I know the point production's there, but they were saying you can't lead a team to the playoffs. Jack Eichel's never been to the playoffs. How can he even go to the playoffs? Not a winner. You just get rid of him. Who's going to want a $10 million contract? Just won a Stanley Cup. I'm just saying he's 24 years old.
So
we haven't even seen him.
Is this recency bias? Is this recency bias because Jack Eichel's story was a success?
No, this is a player. This is a player who came into the league at 18.
Give me another name. Give me another name then.
This is a player that came into the league at 18 years old and produced 60 points. Quentin Byfield, we're waiting for him to hit the 40-point plateau. This I'm just saying, this is a player you know what you're going to get, who's just getting into the prime of his career and can be that gap. I mean, you're talking about having Kopitar, PLD, and Deneau down the middle. That's insane right there. I mean, forget matching up against McDavid and Draisaitl. They're trying to match up against us. And who are they going to match up against Kopitar and PLD?
And the reason it's a bridge is you have locked in. You are a top 6 center. Now, whether PLD is 1 or 2, you've got him locked in for the next bunch of years. So say Kopitar 3 years, right? And then he retires. So for now, for those 3 years, Dubois is number 2. Maybe he's number 1 the last year. And then by
Dubois
that
is going to
point,
have to be number 1 in 2 years from now.
No.
But by the point,
no way Kopitar carries his team at 37. There's no way.
But the point is by this buys more time for Byfield. If he's going to be a center in this league, he doesn't have to do it as quickly. And then the reason it's a bridge, even though that he's there for 7, 8 years in this example, Dubois, you've got a top 6 center locked up. That's not a bad thing, but it also, whether he's 1 or 2 and Byfield is 2 or 1, that as long as Byfield is playing at that level to be even one of those top 6, then mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Is there any team in the league that has a over 10 million center and then an 8 million center? Is that Edmonton?
Toronto Maple Leafs?
Yeah.
Probably.
How many cups have they won? Exactly. Wow. So,
well, I mean,
I'm just saying though.
Would you trade rather have the Toronto Maple Leafs forward core over the Kings? I think that's a discussion everybody would say the Maple Leafs, right?
But Kopitar's making $10 million for 1 year. It's right. He's only got 1 year left, so I don't think this is that big of a deal.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. Is like I think a lot of this kind of notion, this negativity toward acquiring a player like PLD and his cap is because you look at the Kings salary cap, you go on Cap Friendly, you see just how tight they are. I mean, if he were available next offseason, we'd be all over this. We'd be like, oh, yeah, we have Kopitar's deals, $10 million deals coming off the books. He's probably going to be re-signed for maybe $6 million. The salary cap's going up. We can easily add another $8 million center. And this is kind of why I think we've kind of missed how they could make this work financially. And I think we should talk about that because we'd kind of be remiss just to talk about bringing in $8 million without figuring out a way to kind of fit this in. Stanley Cup teams figure out a way to make salary caps work for them to win cups. Look at the last couple teams that have won. The Vegas Golden Knights were just $14 million over the salary cap.
So you're saying breaking legs. Okay, so we'll go to LA. We'll break some bones.
No, I'm saying this.
Put them on a long-term IR, and then.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying. I'm saying this. Well, let me finish. Vegas was $14 million over. Tampa was like $20 million over the 2 years they won. Colorado was under, but they don't count. They had Cale Makar on an entry-level deal. He's fine.
Oh, so they did it the right way, and then they don't count.
I'm just saying teams can figure out this. The salary cap is fake. Teams figure out a way to get around it. You look at the Kings' actual payroll. They were last among Western Conference teams. They were the lowest teams in actual payroll in the Western Conference playoffs. Second in the playoffs, only to the New York Islanders, who were I think $1 million less than them. Just saying, why don't you acquire like a random contract? And I put this in the chat. I was talking to Joe about this. Acquire a contract like Jacob Voracek's $8 million contract just to LTIR him, and you open up that space to make it happen. Get creative. Stanley Cup winning teams are getting creative. Mark Stone's back just happened to be healthy come playoff time. Get creative to win cups. That's what the Kings need to do. They have the money to do it. They have the money to do it. They're one of the top 10 most valued NHL franchises in the league. Figure it out. Make it. You only have Kopitar for 3 more years. If you don't win a cup with Kopitar in the next 3 years, I think it's going to be looked at as a bad situation, maybe even a failure in LA. I think you have to do whatever you can. If you're Rob Blake,
hot topic for another episode.
You have to do whatever you can if you're Rob Blake to try to win a cup with Kopitar as the captain. You made him the captain. You told him, hey, we're gonna have this rebuild. Just stick with us. Stick with us through this rebuild, and we'll try to get you another cup. If you don't get that, if you don't have Gary Bettman handing cup to Kopitar, I think a lot of people in LA are going to be upset, and I'm sure Andre would probably be upset too.
Or at least a couple of sustained deep runs, right? It's hard to win cups. So
there's no banners for sustained deep runs.
But to Russ's point, though, I agree wholeheartedly. Like they've tried to thread the needle of build, develop, but not totally tear it down, because they didn't really tear it down. There's some pieces that were still left to try to take one more kick at the can with these guys. In order for that to be successful, you need to hit on prospects. Hasn't happened yet, but I feel that it is percolating. Velarde finally had a big year last year, but like they need these guys, the Kalievs and everybody else,
Clark is successful so far
because they're cheap. But I'm saying you need cheap NHL talent to offset some of that, because you got to pay your stars. So I agree with what Russ is saying here.
Yeah,
that's Russ brought up an interesting point here for me, and I've been anti-PLD here. I think that you're looking at salary cap is just whatever you want to make it. So if the Kings want to go all in and say, hey, PLD, you deserve 8 years because that's what it's going to require to get you, and they want to figure it out in 3 years or 4 years or whatever, that would be my pro argument, right? Like, hey, I get it. Like 8 years is a lot. But is $8 million going to be a lot for a second line center in year 6, 7, 8 of that contract? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? And to Russ's point, who gives an F? Right? That's 6, 7, 8 years down the line. Like, if they're really trying to win right now, that would be arguably a top 2 or 3 forward core in the NHL if PLD was second line center. And I get that. What is that going to cost? What all that kind of stuff goes on. Is Kopitar going to be able to maintain his 1C status because Father Time is ultimately undefeated? I just don't think that it's like you're not acquiring somebody to be a firm 2. You're acquiring somebody to be a 2, and then what if Kopitar's bad next year? And he has to be the 1. He's never been a 1. Like that kind of stuff is my thought process there. Like, there's no guarantee that Kopitar is good because he has evaded the time reference so far. I just think that it's an interesting topic here because there's such a flux with the center group. Danault is never going to be a number 1, so he's good 2 or 3. He's right there. Can Kopitar be the elite guy for a year or 2 more? Who knows? Can PLD ever be an elite player and carry a team? We don't know. So that's where, like, this move, there's a lot of like, oh yeah, we can put this on paper and we can be excited about it because of what the potential could be. But is there really an elite producer there? Is there a guy that can continue to pump Kempe 40-plus goals going forward? Is there another winger that isn't a center that was displaced that was good for 3 weeks on the other side? There's a lot of question marks here. I don't see PLD as the piece that you're just placing and the jigsaw puzzle is over. I think there's a lot of question marks, and I think that's where a lot of fans kind of have remiss with this.
I think it makes that jigsaw puzzle look a lot prettier, is what I'll say. I mean, if that's why when I heard the rumor that Friedman brought up, and the reason we're talking about it, I mean, Elliot Friedman's obviously one of the best insiders in the game. If he's saying it, then there's obviously something behind it. I mean, it just makes sense because, like we were talking about, if the Kings are trying to win with Kopitar still around, it makes all the sense in the world. They have to go for it. And bringing in a player like Pierre-Luc Dubois means that they understand that situation and they're going for it. They're going for a player to win another cup with Kopitar still around. And let's say, and if Kopitar eventually leaves and you don't have a player like PLD or any other center, and you're pretty much hoping that Quentin Byfield is eventually going to be that number 1. Which, I mean, I'm not even going to say that PLD will ever be a number 1 center in the league. I know that's kind of what he wants to get paid for. But like you said, like, we're talking about like 4 or 5 years down the line, that $8 million might not be as expensive as what we think it will be. So,
And number one centers get paid $10 million. Like, so, and he's not asking for $10 million. Right. For the most part, right? Is there a number one center in the league? I guess Buffalo did a really good job locking up those two guys at under, man, I think they got Cousins and Tage Thompson combined for 14, but that's really rare. Most number one centers are making significant bucks.
But the Bruins, right, for consistent years Penguins had Malkin and Crosby under the same amount, right? So
but this is different. We're talking about inflation. We got to consider inflation. You got to look at cap hit percentage. We can't look at the actual number. You got to look at the actual percentage.
Entire Boston Bruins first line was under $6 million per each for
this year.
Yeah,
and you're talking about Bergeron, who was like, he took it such a team friendly deal.
It's a team friendly deal, but they set the points record. I mean, obviously they didn't win anything, but
they didn't win that ring that you're talking about, Randon.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, it's just we got.
I'm not a PLD fan. I won't ever be until he's probably wearing.
That's not nice.
So. Just buy that Kings jersey and put that. What is he? We're 18 now or 81? I don't know. But I don't know. It's
80,
just
80.
I just think that if the Kings if Rob Blake understands the situation in terms of trying to win with Kopitar still around, which is probably 2-3 year window, then you have to go for it. And if you get in a player like PLD, I think that really helps the case.
And maybe you get him for his contract right now was $6 million. Maybe because of a lot of things that Randon is saying, and these points are fair because that is a narrative that's out there, especially the attitude and blah blah blah. $6 million. Maybe he is a $7.5 million guy. Maybe he's not going to get all the way up to 8.59. You know, maybe. And if you're getting that guy at something like that number, then it's even more attractive to me. So I mean, I'm only throwing that 9 number, 8 to 9 number, because that's what, again, as Russ alluded to on the 32 Thoughts podcast, that's what Friedman noted. It could be anywhere in that range. So I tend to buy that, but
I feel like that's Brisson probably feeding Friedman a little bit.
Could be. Sure.
Because I agree. I mean, $8 million seems a little bit rich because, yeah, like I think like I'll argue PLD all day, but obviously the points like we talked about, that's what everybody looks at. And I think around 7.5. And I also don't know if maybe he won an 8-year deal. I wonder if like we're seeing players maybe tend to go lesser term. Maybe he gets 5 years and he hits free agency again at 29. I mean, that's what I would do if I were him. If he's going to be a good player in the NHL, which I would expect him to be.
Let's argue that then. Would it make it even more? Would it make it more palpable if it was 4 or 5 years at 8?
Hey, you got to answer that question because I'm in on 8. So
I don't think it matters. Yeah, for me it doesn't matter. I can go 4, 5, 8, whatever he wants to do.
I think 5 to 8 is the same. Like that's a long time. Like at that point, like if you're
on the player, it depends on the player, the position.
I don't think
and
it depends on anything because for PLD it doesn't depend on anything, right? The age 5 to 8 doesn't matter. Player doesn't matter. Like you're investing a long time in that player. If it's a 30-year-old player, 5 and 8 is different. 27-year-old player, 5 and 8 is different. But for him, like it really doesn't make a difference for me. I understand this. Now, we're already riding 145. Let's keep this going because I think Kings fans, we're still riding hot. Hey, all you fans in the chat, we're riding hot right now. We're over 48 in the chat, 50 in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Smash that like button. Like button. Are we the Rams? Should we go all in with the Kopitar Doughty saga here and just trade away whatever we need to do to win a championship?
But the thing is they don't necessarily have to do that even because I think you can acquire Dubois, for example, in this discussion without trading Byfield, without trading Clark, without trading a first-round pick. You know, maybe it costs Fulardi. Okay.
Without a first-round pick?
I think it costs first.
So
we give a first for Gavrikov and Korpisalo. Like Dubois is not going to cost a first-round pick?
Touche. So, okay. He'll probably be
I just look at the Kevin Fiala deal. I think that's so comparable. I mean, I think Fiala is a little bit older than what PLD is.
He's a winger.
And then Dubois is a center. So I don't know. I think you can do it for maybe a first, Jordan Spence, and maybe even like I don't know, Victor Arvidsson, because if they want to still be competitive, I think you can do it without giving away Velarde. I really think you can. I just don't. I mean, like I said earlier, it's just everybody knows he wants out. It's not a secret. So and he gets to choose where he pretty much wants to go, because I mean, there's an extension kind of tied to it. No team's going to trade for him if they don't get a long-term extension tied to him. So it's pretty much wherever he wants to go, and Winnipeg has to just figure out a way to get the best bang for their buck for that type of player. So I see people even mentioning Jersey. I could see it being a first-round pick, Jersey and Kaliev. That wouldn't surprise me at all, to be honest with you.
So is Winnipeg retooling, or is they rebuilding? Because if they're rebuilding, it's Pinelli, it's those guys that.
It's a good question.
Cole Peretti.
Yeah, because Pinelli would be a perfect rebuilding guy. Retooling
trading?
would be.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying.
Because
Winnipeg,
50 goals, he's a young player. You could rebuild off of him. But if you're retooling, you want guys with NHL experience, which would be Jersey or Kaliev or that kind of stuff.
So that if they rebuild, that means you're sending out Blake Wheeler. That means you're sending out Mark Scheifele, and you're turning this team over to like Kyle Connor, Nikolai Ehlers, Josh Morrissey, who's signed to a long-term extension. They've got some intriguing young defensemen, but they're kind of thin back there. So I don't know the route that they go. If they're going to totally look to rebuild, or, maybe if Dubois wants out and Hellebuyck says he doesn't want to rebuild, well, as Russ alluded to, you could probably trade Dubois hypothetically to the Kings, get a Jersey, an Arvidsson, and a pick, something like that. Pick your, give or take on some of the names, and still be competitive if you hang on to Hellebuyck, if you keep the rest of the guys, Scheifele, all those guys.
I'll say this, Joe. I've seen this on Twitter, and let me know what you guys think. Trade away both Iafallo and Victor Arvidsson, plus prospects and picks for both Hellebuyck and PLD.
I mean,
you have to make the cap room. You have to make the cap room, but you're getting away. So PLD over VA or Hellebuyck over Iafallo. Where are you guys feeling on that? You get it.
I think the Kings could be more creative with their cap situation, where they don't have to trade both of those players. I think they can figure it out.
But for both,
I would like them to try to get a little creative with
Hellebuyck and PLD.
Maybe. I mean, I think you can do it even without trading both of Arvidsson and Iafallo and get it. Maybe. I mean, if they're like, I just don't see. Man, I don't see Winnipeg going. I mean, if they're trading like Joe said, if they're trading Hellebuyck too, then that's rebuild.
Then
they're going full rebuild. There's no point in even sugarcoating it anymore. I don't know how you're going to sell that to fans. I mean, you might as well, like, why would they even want a player like Arvidsson on an expiring deal and Iafallo with 2 years left? That would make no sense for them either.
Yep.
So,
but they could retrade those guys.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You're getting futures now. You're not looking for another trade for potential, because let's say you those players play and they get hurt, then their trade value is even lesser than what you're hoping for.
I'm saying trade them right away.
I mean, then they're pretty much the Calgary Flames, when they're pretty much just hoping to keep going, where they really should have just rebuilt it, because that's where the Flames are at right now. They traded for Jonathan Huberdeau, gave him a freaking $10 million deal for 8 years, and now they weren't even good, and now they're going to
win. No, he's going to be fine. I'm back on the Flames. All they need is a right.
Come on!
I'm so ready for that.
We don't have a podcast long enough for your Flames infatuation here. Man, this is a good podcast. Hey, the debate stature here for the Kings ran about almost 2 hours here. I love it for this group here. Kings are in so many different ways, right? We could go this way, that way. A lot of movement that can happen with expiring contracts, new players coming in. Obviously, both my co-hosts love the PLD option. Ultimately, we want a cup. We want to raise the cup. We don't want to see former Kings raise the cup. We want to see current Kings raise the cup. So What are we going to do about that? We'll be covering all that here on HockeyRoyalty.com and Hockey Royalty Podcast. Please subscribe, HockeyRoyalty.com, Hockey Royalty Hockey _Royalty. Random Commando 24, NHL Russell, and we have JW Paterino. Hey, if you wanted some rain news, Kopitar 4 HOF is where you're at. Our sponsor is DraftKings. Code THPN. What I got to say, for the offseason, the chat has been electric.
Yeah,
40,
it's been great.
40
You guys
plus,
have been
50
awesome.
plus, 60 plus people in the chat. Love it. Thank you guys. You guys are the true fans of the LA Kings. Appreciate you guys coming in here and making it rowdy here in the chat. And as always, on this podcast, go Kings go.